We are glad you've joined us to hear this message from Center of Hope Victory Church. We have a vision to release the spirit of revival and to raise up and equip Holy Spirit-led believers to do the work of the ministry. We hope you enjoy the following message.
So everything that's written in the entire Bible is written to a Hebrew culture with a Hebrew mindset. And we read it from a Greek culture with a Greek mindset. So often we miss a lot of the intricacies of what's going on. So Ryan, if you want to put that verse up for me. That's where I'm going from today. Okay, it's in pieces, so I'll have to switch it as I get along, yeah. Okay. I was going to have us read it all, but it might be too awkward to flip it as we read it. Not too hard? Okay. So then, if we can all read it together, I know it's King James. I'm not going to apologize, I like King James, but it's easier to study from, which is what I'm going to get into rather than just read a paraphrase. So we all try and read together. Take heed to thyself, lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land whither thou goest, lest it be for a snare in the midst of thee. But ye shall destroy their altars, break their images, and cut down their groves. For thou shalt worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Now, I think from that we want to go back to verse 12. I think when we read that, we know what he's saying, basically. But we miss a lot of the intricacies when we just go from the Greek mindset. And we know what it means to start with the beginning. Take heed. What does take heed mean? Pay attention. But that's from the Greek mindset. And there's nothing wrong with that. It does mean be careful, listen to what's going on. But the Hebrew mindset more works to things that you can actually see or draw. You cannot see, take heed. I mean, can you draw a picture of take heed? No. You can draw a picture of somebody taking heed, but to actually take heed, you can't draw it. Hebrew mindset is often focused on what you can see, a thing. So the word take heed, literally, the word shamar, is to put a fence or a hedge or a corral of thorns. So you're not just being careful, you're putting up a hedge around something. And evidently in the Hebrew times, Old Testament, when a shepherd went out at night, he had a sheep at night, and he wanted to be careful that the sheep would be protected for the night, he would get stones, make a circle of stones, and put briars around the top of it to protect them. That's what take heed means to the Hebrew. Put up that fence with the briars so that you're totally protected. So you can see it's kind of the same idea, but it's more easy to see exactly what you're doing when you take heed. Because you just say, be careful. Well, I mean, be careful 100 different ways. But take heed in the Hebrew is putting that fence up around. And if the fence is around you, you're totally protected. And evidently the shepherd would build this fence, and then he would lay down in the doorway so nothing could get in. So when we're saying take heed, we're saying build this fence around us so that nothing can get to us. It's not just a matter of, oh, yeah, I can see what's coming. Yeah, no. You're protecting yourself with thorns and briars and to put a hedge. Now, most Hebrew words, not all, but most have three different ideas in them. They've got an action meaning, which is kind of like your verb, a concrete meaning, which is kind of like your noun, and some of them do have an abstract meaning, but not all of them. But if you take this word shamar, take heed, the three meanings are: the action is to guard something, the concrete meaning is a briar, a thorn, and the abstract meaning is to have custody. So you take those three meanings together, you're taking custody to guard yourself with that thorn fence around you. So taking heed is not just being careful. It's an actual act of doing something, of building this hedge around you. So God is telling the Hebrews here, and he's restating his promise to Moses. He's telling them, he said, build this fence around you. Build a fence that's going to protect you so nothing can get in. And if we take this to be us today, we are to put a hedge around us today. Not just be careful and watch out what's going on, but put this hedge around us of briars. Now, of course, we're not going to go out in the woods and get briars and, keep people away from us. But we can put a fence around us today through prayer, through reading, through praising, through worshiping. There's many ways we can put up a hedge around us to take heed. And why do we need a hedge? Well, as you see, so we don't make a covenant. And you think of in Matthew 6:24 and Luke 6:13, no man can serve two masters. So if we've got a covenant with one person, we can't have a covenant with another person. That's an opposite covenant. So if we make a covenant in some way with the world, it's hard to make a covenant with God in the same manner. So we've got to see the covenant is with God, and we put this hedge around us to ensure that that covenant stays with us. It says to make no covenants. And again, English says make no covenants. The Hebrew says do not seal a covenant. Now, I don't know about you, but I can see a slight difference there. Make a covenant is not quite as dramatic to me as sealing a covenant. Sealing a covenant to me is more permanent, and you don't just seal things with, You seal it with something that proves it's been sealed. In the old days, they'd have those, wax stamps they'd put on and seal something that was done. The old covenants was sealed with blood. So if you seal a covenant, to me, it's a bit more emphatic than just making a covenant. So he's saying, don't make any other covenants with the inhabitants of the land. Now, inhabitants, if you're an inhabitant of Kincardine, you're there. You're not 20 different places. You're in one spot. If you're an inhabitant of Canada, you're kind of, you do visit around, but an inhabitant generally is somebody who kind of is in a spot. And he tells us to keep us from, not to make it, like I said, I've got my notes in a different way here, and I'm kind of having trouble following them, but we'll get through. So keep ourselves from sitting down so we don't make a covenant with them. Now, what kind of sitting down? The land, the Hebrew word for land is beretz, which actually means little pieces of pottery. Now, I can see that where a land is, if people of a land are pieces of pottery in a different spot. Every country, especially if you look at Europe, with all the little countries, it's like little pieces of pottery all over the place. So the land is these different pieces of pottery that are there, not for a specific reason, but they've got a purpose in themselves. And if we sit down and make a covenant with those people of those lands, we are in a way make a covenant away from God. And that's what he's telling the people here. If you make a covenant with the people of these lands, you're making a covenant that's drawing you away from him. So we have to be careful not to sit down with inhabitants of the land. Because if we sit down with the inhabitants of the land, what's going to happen to us? We'll take on their idiosyncrasies. One of my favorite stories, my dad used to go to visit his cousin in Texas. And you get on the phone, and within 10 minutes, you're talking with this drawl, because that's the way the cousin would talk with this drawl, and it just kind of picks up in you. And if you sit down with anybody for long enough, you're going to pick up some of those idiosyncrasies. My wife now thinks my jokes are funny. She's been with me long enough. See, she picks up my idiosyncrasies. So if you stay with somebody, if you stay with the inhabitants of the land long enough, you're going to pick up their idiosyncrasies, their habits, their covenants. If they've got a covenant, you're going to fall in with their covenant. So that's why he's saying don't sit in the land with those people, because you're going to pick up their covenants. We have to make sure we don't sit down with him or anyone, because we sit down with one covenant and then another one, and another one, because in our daily lives, we don't settle down with people of the land, but we go to work, and there's that group of people. We go to some sports, let's say you play basketball. There's another group of people. Maybe you're in a walking club. There's another group of people. And each of those group of people has their own covenants in a way. Now, I'm not saying you don't talk to anybody, but when you're in these groups, you have to realize they might have their own covenant. The people in the group might have their own covenant. And the same with this verse. He's saying, these people have their own covenants. Don't sit down with them and stay with them. There's nothing wrong with visiting, but don't sit down and become part of them and become part of their covenant. Because when you do that, you're drawn away from God. And the Israelites, I think he gets to this soon. Well, maybe get to it too soon. The Israelites knew many different gods. We always think, oh, the Israelites, Jehovah, that was it, Yahweh. No, if you read, they were in a country where everybody had their own gods. Like you go to, I just listened to a gentleman talking, he said some of these peoples, like Hittites, Canaanites, all those, they might have 100 different gods. And it was nothing for the Israelites to understand and to kind of, yeah, okay, those gods are good. They weren't totally directed to Jehovah. So when we sit down with those groups, sometimes we can run the risk of taking on something they might have. Then it says we will be trapped. Now again, pretty obvious what be trapped. But when the word for trapped in Hebrew means to gather together. So when you think of an animal being trapped, you don't think of it being gathered together. You think of it being trapped in the hands of something. But when you're trapped by something, in the Hebrew mindset, you are gathered together with them. So if we are trapped in a snare in the midst of these people, it means we are now gathered together with those people. So we've got to be careful about everything we say and do in these groups because we run the risk of becoming gathered together with them. Okay, an animal doesn't go into a trap willingly. I mean, it's too late. You know, by the old snares, the animal gets in the trap, and when he realizes it's in there, he pulls in worse and makes it worse. Those pit traps you get, you know, the animal doesn't know the pit's there until it's in the bottom, and then it's too late. That's why we have to put this hedge around us, to be careful, to make sure we don't get in these traps, because once you're in the trap, it's often too late. Now, for an animal, yes, but for us, if we're trapped in something, it's easier not to get involved in something than it is to be involved and find your way out. So we have to be very careful not to get trapped in these other covenants, and that's why we're being instructed not to sit down with these people. Okay, put a hedge around yourself so you don't seal a covenant with these different groups that you belong to in the land where you go, so there will be no traps set for you, and you'll be gathered together with these people. Right, next one. Then verse 13 tells us how we can do all this stuff. Destroy their altars, break their images, cut down their groves. Well, that's 3,000 years ago. You know, destroy their altars. I don't know the last time I saw an altar out in the world anywhere, like, you know, to destroy. Break their images. The odd time you see in images. Cut down their groves. Like you can read over that in the Greek mind and say, yeah, I kind of know what they're saying, but what is they really getting at? Destroy the altars. If you take the word for the word altar, the letters, and take the meaning from the letters, it means a crown or a weapon that surrounds our house. So an altar is a crown that surrounds your house, your family, you know, your body. So if we have an altar, it's anything that's going to surround our house, the crown that we put on it. You know, what's important? I mean, you put crowns on important things. So if there's anything important that's surrounding your house, you better make sure it's the right thing. And I said, we say an altar, you say, well, I don't have any altars in my house. But do you have anything, a crown, that you've put on that surrounds something in your house? You know, we've all got, you know, I'm going to say altars in our house, but we've all got things we tend to like to do. You know, some of us, it might be watching football. I mean, nothing wrong with watching football, unless it becomes a crown that surrounds your house. There's nothing wrong with wanting to make money. But what if that becomes the crown that surrounds your house? So an altar, in the Greek, like in my mindset, I think of a thing at the front of your church or front of your house with your big stone table and something on top of it. That's an altar. But no, an altar is anything that surrounds, you put a crown on that surrounds your house. And so are we putting crowns on things and making them more important than we are making God important? Are we encouraged? Okay, these places are encouraging us to surround our house with other gods That's why the altars that aren't of God, anything that surrounds our house that's not of God, we need to destroy. Get out of there. And then it says about breaking their images. Now, when I think of breaking, I think of taking a hammer and pop, it's gone. Hebrew is a little bit more graphic than that. Not more graphic, more specific. And the Hebrew word break comes from the idea of when they had their grain harvest, they put the grain on the ground, then they get the cattle to walk around for hours and tromp on this grain until all the husks are off. So it's not just a matter of bang, it's gone. It's no. I'm going to keep tromping on this until it is totally broken. Now, we all know we all know, but I know when I'm not a farmer. When you got grain, you've got to get all the chaff off before the grain's any good. And if you just, break a few pieces, the grain's not good yet. You've got to get all the chaff off. And if you've got an altar and you just hit it with a hammer and break it, the pieces are still there. You can always put pieces back together. But if you, like the cattle, tromp on grain for hours and hours, what are the chances of putting that chaff back on that grain? Not much. So that's the idea of breaking the altar, not just smashing it, tromping on it and trampling it until there's absolutely nothing left that can be put back together. Because we've all heard of many people, alcoholics get clean, they fall back. Drug addicts get clean, they fall back. They've had an altar, they've broken it, but they didn't trample on it. If you trample on it and break it so there's nothing left, in my eyes, it'd be much easier for them to break that habit because they trampled on it until there's absolutely nothing left of it. And the word images comes from the idea of a strong pillar. And what do you use strong pillars for? To hold up a house. What holds up our house? If it's something bad that's holding up our house, we need to trample and get rid of it. If it's something good that's holding up our house, we need to keep it. But if it's one of these altars that's bad that's holding up our house, again, it's not just a matter of, it's done. No, trample on it. It's got to be totally, absolutely gone. Trample until you know it's gone, and then you trample a little bit more just to be on the safe side. Because we all have things in our lives. I speak for myself. I'm assuming I'm fairly, I was going to say I'm assuming I'm fairly normal, but I know that brings a chuckle from a few people. I've got things in my life I know shouldn't be there, and you get rid of them, they show up again. You get rid of them, they show up again. You got to keep trampling on these images, make sure that pillar is gone, and it will never, ever come back again. The groves. Now, I found this one interesting. What's a grove? And just normal talking, what's a grove? Trees, bunch of trees. Supposed to cut down their trees? If you're just reading that, you say, cut down the trees, and just keep on going. It doesn't make much sense. But the Hebrew word there for groves is ashtaroth, which means to tie a cord or a rope. And literally, the one literal translation I read said the groves are fetishes of happiness. Now, in my mind, I kind of knew what a fetish was, but I had to look it up to me so I could explain it. Fetish means a material object regarded with awe as having mysterious powers or being the representative of a deity that may be worshipped through it. That's what a grove is. It's not a bunch of trees. It's something that we put in our lives, an object that we regard with awe that might have mysterious powers. Now, whether we believe in all the mysterious powers or not, there are things we can put in our lives that will have mysterious powers on us. Let's say, hey, don't put your hands up, don't want to get anybody in trouble here, but how many people in the past said, hey, let's turn to the horoscope, see what's going to happen today? Hey, I did it one time, read the horoscopes, repented of it, done it all, but there are some things we can do that seem innocent at the time, but can be something that, now, I guess a horoscope is kind of a material object that has mysterious powers or representing a deity. There's so many things in the world like that. And we have to be careful none of those things get in our way. It says to cut down those groves. Does it say cut down? Cut down the groves. They may be seen as they may give us worldly happiness, but if they're connected with a God, then they bring us worldly happiness, but in the long run, brings destruction. We've got to be so careful of things that might be worldly happy. Anything other than a God that has grown tall and firm in our lives, like a grove, no matter how much happiness it brings, must be broken down because it can't bring anything but bad. Oh, he's ahead of me. My goodness. Now it says, goes on to say, you shall worship no other God. Well, isn't that obvious? Worship no other God? But I said the Hebrews had many gods. Now they knew Yahweh was the head God, but they also had other gods. I mean, when Moses went up the mountain, what's the first thing they did with their gold? Let's make an image to another god. That's the first thing they thought of. Well, it's not as though it was something foreign to them. You wouldn't think of, like, let's think what we can do. Let's imagine something weird. It was already in their mind, this God. It's not as though it was something different to them. They knew about this God. They wanted to make it already. So it doesn't take long to get to that worshiping of another God. The word for worship, now again, this is where the Hebrew mindset comes in. Can you draw a picture of worship? You can draw a picture of somebody worshiping, but you can't draw a picture of worship. At least I can't. I'm not a great artist, but I don't think I could draw worship. The Hebrew word for worship, the root word is shahah, which means a pit, big hole. What's worship got to do with a big hole? When you're in a hole, what can you see? Only what's looking down on top of you. If the person who dug the pit is up there, what are you going to see? The person who dug the pit. And that's all you're going to see. So if God's dug the pit, and I'm in the pit, and I'm looking up, the only thing I can see is God. If somebody else has dug the pit, and I look up, all I can see is them. So when you're worshiping God, it's like you're in a pit looking up, and the only thing you can see is God. Comes the idea of a high walls. So you can't see anything when you're worshiping God except God. When we worship, I know you start worshiping, you think, oh, there's a car just went by on the road, So many things take your vision away. You look at somebody else, oh, they're worshiping well. I like the way they're doing it. That music's good. I like that. And so many things can draw us away. Not that music is good, but sometimes you got to get to the point where you say, you know what? I'm going to get this pit, these four walls, so when I look up, I see nothing but God. Now, literally, the word means to bow or fall prostrate. When was the last time, not just saying here, but anywhere, where you've seen people worshiping, where you see them flat on their face on the floor? I mean, that's what the word means when you worship. Be flat on your face on the floor. I mean, you don't just do that for anybody. You only do it for God because you realize how awesome He is and how powerful and what He can do. And when you get in front of Him, and I know I've heard the story, and that I look at this two ways. Somebody said, when you go to heaven, you won't see God. You won't run up and say, hey, God, how are you? Yes, God is our friend, He's a friend, and we can look at Him that way. But really, when you get to heaven, is it going to be, hi, how are you? Or is it going to be, God? What do? You fall on your face. I love the story in Ezekiel. Well, I hope I got that one right. Where he says, I'm undone. Isaiah, I'm undone. Like, what a better word to say when you meet God. I'm undone. And that's almost what prostrate is. You're down to the point where I got nothing left. Face on the floor, worshiping God. I said the root word is there, a pit. Now, when the word there for worship is the same word with a chet added at the end, and the chet can represent the presence of God or a tent wall. So again, the word for worship means in a pit in the presence of God. Think of it for a minute. There's a lot of people you get stuck in a car with. You think, oh, when's this ride going to be over? But if you're in a pit with God, think about that for a minute. You're in a pit, and the only other thing in the pit is God. I get the shivers just thinking about that. But that's what worship is. Getting in a pit with God. Nothing else. To worship him, we need to put ourselves in the pit where we can see nothing but him and trust in him. Because I usually think of a pit as not a good place. But if you're in a pit with God, I'll take that any day. It's going to be a wonderful place because I know he wants good for me. I know he will take care of me in that pit. And as long as I'm in that pit worshiping, I'm in the place where he wants it to be. That's why if we worship something else, we are in that pit. And if I'm in another pit, can I see God over in that pit? No. Again, you can't serve two masters. You're in one pit or the other pit. We got to choose which pit we're going to be in. I'm going to choose to be in the pit with God and worship him. Now, the word jealous, I love this word jealous because it's got such a bad rap in the Greek mindset. What do you mean jealous? That means, people who are jealous or just have a bad attitude sometimes, you think. But no, jealous in Hebrew has a totally different mindset. The word is kana, and oddly enough, now I don't know a lot about gematria where they take the numbers of the letters and match them all up, but I do know that when numbers match up, the words are somehow related. The word for jealous and the word for worship match up in 6 different ways. So there's got to be a connection there somewhere. The root word for jealous means gathering seeds. Figure that one out. When you think about it, gathering seeds, what's that got to do with being jealous? But a bird will gather materials and seeds to make its nest to raise its young. The word itself means a zealous one protecting something like a bird protecting its nest. Now think about it for a minute. We had that question earlier, how many of you had children or grandchildren? Think of your child or your grandchild. They're out playing in your front yard. You see a van pull up and somebody get out and grab the kid. Oh, somebody's grabbing my grandchild. No, you are in full mode before you get to the van. That's jealousy. Jealousy is not wanting something for you. Jealousy is nobody is going to hurt that grandchild of mine. Nobody is going to come near them. That's why it says God is jealous. He's saying nothing is going to come near my children. Nothing will take over them. He's jealous for us. And, you hear so many people, God's jealous. That's not good. Jealousy isn't good. Jealousy is wonderful. I want God to be so jealous of me that nothing comes near me. And that's what the idea of jealous is. When we step in his protection and let himself protect us, where are we? In that pit. So when he's jealous for us, we find ourselves in his pit because he's protecting us there. We worship in that pit, and he's protecting us as we worship. And again, that idea, you can't draw a picture of jealous, but you can draw a picture of somebody protecting a nest. And that's the idea, that different Greek Hebrew mindset. The Hebrews wanted to see it and see what's going on, not just this concept. Because jealousy, like I said, the concept of jealousy now is kind of negative. If somebody say you're jealous, it's usually a dig at you. But to God, jealousy is the high point of love for somebody. Again, think if somebody came at your kids or your wife or your husband, you're not going to just stand and say, oh, something's going on over there. I wonder what it is. No, you're going to be there like a shot. I know I used Jeff as this example once before. If somebody went after Milo, Jeff, are you there? He wouldn't care what it was. If somebody came after my grandchild, I wouldn't care what it was. You're going. Because I'm jealous for them. And that's what we got to get in our mind, that jealousy is not a bad thing. Back in, again, not going to this one, Exodus 20:5, 22, 24, and Deuteronomy 5:9, the same word is translated bow down. And that word shirah, which is used for worship, is 172 times in the Old Testament. It's either worship or bow down 160 times. The other ones is obeisance or reverence. And the command of each one is the same. Don't bow down to anything but God, because he's a jealous God. And he says, don't serve any other God. Now, if you serve somebody, what are you doing? You're bringing them something. You're doing a service for them. So if I'm serving another God, I'm doing a service for them. I'm working for them. So the idea is, don't serve anything but God. You're going to work for him, serve him, and nobody else. Nothing else. Now again, it's somewhat the idea is similar to the idea of a pit. You become subservient to the one whose pit you're in. If I'm in the pit of God, I'm doing what he wants. I'm serving him. If I'm in the pit of something else, I'm subservient to them, doing what they want. So it all goes back to the idea of worshiping being in a pit, something with big, strong walls that you're not going to be able to get out of, because you're in there with God, and it's a wonderful place to be. Now, I'm going to switch from the verses here. You can leave it up there, though. So the word trust. The word trust, again, my pronunciation is probably terrible. Shaka literally means to flee for protection. So if I trust somebody, if you trust your neighbor, they're good people. But that's not the Hebrew idea. The Hebrew idea of trust is to flee to them for protection. So when I say I trust God, it's not that I know he's going to do good for me. It means I'm going to run to him because I need protection. That's why I trust him. I trust him because I know he's going to take care of me. I flee to him for protection. If we put ourselves in that pit that God has made for us, we're under his protection. We are trusting him in that pit. How many would like to be in a pit? No. We have to trust the person, in the pit. And I remember being told years ago, the house I lived in Ripley had one of those dug wells, 86 feet deep. The plumber plumbed it one time to see how deep it was. 86 feet deep with rocks all the way around. And I queried somebody who knew about history. I said, how did they dig those wells? And they said, well, somebody would dig, and as they would go, they would put the rocks in as they go down. And I said, wait a minute. This well is 86 feet deep. How many of you would go down an 86-foot deep well, trusting the person at the top to bring you up? I don't see many hands. Yeah, I know I would. I don't care who's at the top. I'm not going down an 86 feet deep well knowing someone will have to haul me up afterwards. But if we trust God, we can go in the pit because we know he's jealous for us. He will allow nothing to harm us. And if we trust him, we will go to him for protection. So we are in that pit because we trust him. We're not in the pit hoping he'll do what's right. We're in the pit because we trust him, because we are worshiping him. All those things have the idea of he is the only thing that matters. Okay, the word for trust, 3 letters, chet, samak, he. The chet represents a fence. Samak represents a support. And he represents an assistance or medicine. So when you're trusting, start again. The chet is the fence. The samak is the support or the medicine. The he is something being revealed. So the word altogether means a fence of medicine, of support, is being revealed to us. So when we trust him, it's not just a matter of, yes, I trust you, God. When we're trusting, we're saying he has a medicine that is surrounding us like a fence, and I can see him in it. It's being revealed to me. So when I trust him, his support, his medicine that's supporting me is being revealed to me. And if I'm in the pit, what a wonderful place to be, trusting God in the bottom of a pit. Another word for trust is batach. Bet means a house. Tet is surround or a basket. And chet is the fence again. So that trust is the fence that surrounds our house. See, when we read them in Greek, we trust somebody. But when you look at the Hebrew and see all the different nuances there are in there, trusting is God putting a fence around my house, putting a fence of medicine around so I can trust in him. When I worship him, he's putting me in a pit where I can see nothing but him. I mean, all of these things seem to go together to that idea of when we worship, we've got to close everything off. Because really, when you fall on your face on the floor, what can you see? The floor. There's nothing else to distract you. And I don't know about you, occasionally I've been face down on the floor, and you really don't hear too much either. You're kind of just so caught up with being overwhelmed that nothing gets in. The worship is that idea of closing everything else off. 4 walls, high walls. I'm trusting God. He's got that surrounding fence around. It's going to protect me. The pit is going to protect me. I look up, all I can see him, and he is jealous. So no matter what, when I'm in that pit, he's going to protect me no matter what. And that's why I've really tried to get into Hebrew lately, because there's so many things in it that just bring out more than just that Greek idea of trust. We all know what trust means. When you think about it as all that other stuff, the fence, the medicines, worshiping is just that pit, it seems to me, I'm not saying it's for everybody, but for me, it just brings things much more alive and much clearer as to what God is trying to tell me. Because remember, these are Hebrew people using Hebrew words in a Hebrew mindset, telling other Hebrew people. So why am I reading it with a Greek mindset? And whoops, I'm done anyway, so I don't have to worry about that. Every one of these that we read is written with a Greek mindset, because it's English. That's why I love to go back to the Hebrew to find out what the Hebrew words mean, because there's so much depth to them, and it gets you past that Greek mindset. And I think that word jealous is the perfect example. Jealous in a Greek mindset is bad. Jealous in a Hebrew mindset, I've got nothing to worry about, because he's going to come and protect me. It doesn't matter what comes at me, he's there.
We hope you enjoyed this message. For more information about Center of Hope Victory Church, please visit centerofhopevictory.com.